It's your Friday daily delivery. I am Michael Rand. Glad to be back for another day. Final show of the week. Happy Big Twins series to those who celebrate. Bobby Nightengale Jr. joins me here in a little while to preview Twins versus Guardians. 4 games this weekend, 3 more against Kansas City right after that. Weather looks like it's going to be immaculate, even a little bit on the cool side for this time of year, but I don't think anybody's going to complain about that when it comes to the weather, especially for a ball game. Like I said, 4 games, 2 of them today. They play a doubleheader. Twins starting a whole bunch of young pitchers in this series. Louis Varland expected to get a start tonight. You also have Simeon Woods-Richardson and David Festa expected to take turns in the rotation 3 out of these 4 games. So a lot at stake for the Twins, who are 3.5 behind Cleveland right now. Kansas City just a half game behind Minnesota and 4 games behind Cleveland. So really a 3-team race, 7 games at Target Field here for the Twins against the Guardians and then the Royals. So we will talk more to Bobby Nightengale about that, about the Joe Ryan injury. Carlos Correa still not back. Matt Wallner having a great last month or so. All the storylines for the Twins, Bobby and I will have you covered in just a little bit. Got some USA basketball thoughts after a thriller in the semifinal round against Serbia on Thursday. They pulled that game out. Mike Sertich, legendary Minnesota-Duluth hockey coach, passed away at the age of 77. I have some memories of dealing with Serty in the 90s that I'll share at the end of the show as well. First, though, what did I miss? Vikings, here we go. Let's start the runaway hype train. Kevin O'Connell addressed the media on Thursday and, as promised, gave a good outline for how they are going to use their quarterbacks and their players in particular during Saturday's preseason opener, the only preseason game at US Bank Stadium. Let's just let him lay it out here for you right now.
We are planning on playing the majority of our guys. There's still some guys either dealing with a day-to-day thing here or there that we'll evaluate as we go into it. And there may be a couple guys we hold out, but for the most part, we will play the majority of our guys. Sam Darnold will start the game, and then we will transition to J.J. McCarthy for what I'm very, very excited to see. A significant amount of work and really see him hopefully apply a lot of the things that he's been doing really well, just as Sam has every day in practice. And it's been a really good start to the process for all those guys. And now we get the opportunity to play against somebody else in a game setting before our joint practices next week. So now we're reaching the point where we get to see a lot of good barometer on where we're at, not only at that position, but a lot of competitive positions right now on our team. More than likely, JJ will turn it over to Jaron Hall to finish. And talking to Nick Mullins, he's had just an unbelievable way about him in that room with those guys, stepping in, really at any moment and going in and just executing our system. He's already proven that he knows our system. Nick will get plenty of work as we move forward through the rest of the training camp, but he will be available, but might not play in this one in an attempt to really maximize the ops for some guys that are either new or, even in Jaron's case, in year 2 in the system.
Now, this is a bit of a departure from the recent past, right? When you had Kirk Cousins as your starter, you didn't need him to play in the preseason. He knew the system, you knew what you were getting out of him, but now you have a new starter in Sam Darnold and a rookie quarterback in J.J. McCarthy, who is the quarterback of the future. You want to get a good look at both of them. And saying McCarthy is going to play a significant amount of time kind of makes me think he's going to get maybe like the middle 2 quarters. You don't know exactly how it's going to shake out. And O'Connell even talked about that, going back to his playing days. He never wants to guarantee exactly, what quarter or what time, how the split is going to go, because some of that depends on, what if the other team has an 8-minute drive and all of a sudden you don't have as much time as you thought? What if you go 3 and out and you want to see more out of somebody? So it's hard to pinpoint exactly, but if you kind of had to guess, maybe you'd see Darnold for a couple series, and then maybe you'd see McCarthy for the bulk of the second and third quarter, and then turning it over to Jaron Hall. And then it doesn't sound like Nick Mullins is going to play. They already know kind of what he brings to the table if he needs to play this season. But we should get a good sample size, again, just the preseason, but a pretty good sample size of what J.J. McCarthy, where he's at least at this point in his progression. And if he plays well, right, there's the thing. If he plays well, it is going to be hard to contain the kind of enthusiasm that fans will have for him, especially kind of pending how Sam Darnold plays. Now, Darnold, by all impressions, has been really good in camp. From what I've seen, he's looked good. He's been really good learning this offense, connecting with JJ, the other JJ, Justin Jefferson, who won't play in this preseason game, by the way. But you know where the pecking order is right now. That's not going to change off of one preseason game, but the hype will change once you see J.J. McCarthy in a Vikings uniform, once you see him connect on a few passes, once you can kind of visualize what the future might look like with J.J. McCarthy. So that is what is at stake on Saturday. Again, not the biggest stakes right now. First preseason game, first time he'll put on a Vikings uniform in a meaningful way, but this is the start of the potential hype train, and I can't wait to watch it. In case I didn't give the particulars of that game, 3 p.m. Saturday, US Bank Stadium against the Raiders. Also on Saturday, Team USA versus France in the men's basketball gold medal game in Paris. The France team certainly will have a lot of the home crowd on its side. The U.S. had to rally on Thursday to beat Serbia 95-91. They were down 17 points to the Nikola Jokic-led Serbian squad, but did pull it out in the end. LeBron James, a triple-double. Steph Curry, 36 points. They needed every bit of what they could muster in that game to advance to what was expected to be, not an easy walk to the gold medal, but maybe a more a less stressful journey to the gold medal game. But they got there. They pulled it out when they needed to. Anthony Edwards, kind of a bit player in this game, played, I think, 11, 13 minutes, something like that, had a couple of points. This game was about the veterans. This game was about LeBron and Steph, probably LeBron's last Olympics. You never want to say that because the guy keeps defying all odds, all age, things like that. Maybe Steph's last Olympics, too. Both those guys have been around for a long time. They don't want to go out with a bronze or a silver. They want to go home with gold. They made sure of it in that game at least, and now they have an opportunity to finish this thing off on Saturday. Let's talk Twins today with Bobby Nightengale Jr. from the Star Tribune. 3.5 games behind Cleveland going into this big 4-game series. Doubleheader Friday at Target Field, single games Saturday and Sunday. Royals right there behind them, and they come next on the schedule, Bobby. It's a big time, and it's a bad time to be without one of your top 3 pitchers.
Yeah, I mean, terrible timing for Joe Ryan to leave a start. Left with right triceps tightness in the 3rd inning against the Cubs, and no news yet in terms of what an MRI will show. I think he's getting an MRI on Thursday, the off day, and so I would expect more news Friday or Saturday. But I think the expectation, just kind of post game one, he's probably going to end up on the injured list just based off the fact it's hard to come out of a game with an injury and then in 6 days he's cleared to throw 100 pitches in a start. I just think that's probably unrealistic. But Joe Ryan didn't talk after the game, but Rocco Baldelli had a conversation with him and said, just looking him in the eyes, he obviously had the conversation with a ton of pitchers who've been dealt with injuries. He said he didn't get the sense that it was overly like, this is your season's definitely over. You felt something that this is going to cost you. He said it was kind of more of a relaxed conversation with Joe Ryan, giving Rocco the confidence that, he'll have time to come back this season. So that's ultimately, I mean, he's a playoff pitcher. If he's healthy. So, I mean, looking long-term, that's the biggest thing. Even if you lose him for, the next 2 weeks, they would take that trade-off if that means you can have him for the playoffs.
No, we obviously didn't get to talk to him on Wednesday, but I do wonder if, last year he tried to pitch through that groin situation, and I wonder if that has taught him to not try to pitch through this one, and be a little bit smarter about it.
Yeah, it's possible. Like Ryan Jeffers said, he had no inkling that something was wrong until Joe Ryan motioned to the dugout after a pitch and said, "Hey, I'm done." But his stuff was still fine. His last fastball he threw was 93 miles an hour. His splitter was a little bit slower than usual, but not significantly so that it was like jaw dropping. That hey,
Right.
get him out of there. So it sounded like it was more of a feeling than seeing direct results to it. So, that's probably a sign that he called for the training staff early than trying to pitch through it and making things worse, possibly. So, without knowing exactly what he was going through, because he didn't talk, a lot of it's speculation. But I would just say behind the scenes, there's at least cautious optimism that, maybe they got something early and it won't be a hugely serious injury.
Well, as far as more experienced pitchers go, you still got Pablo Lopez. He had a little bit of a rough outing, but he'd been really good since the break. You've still got Bailey Ober doing his thing. But beyond that, if, Joe Ryan, let's assume he's going to miss 2 or 3 starts minimum. You've already got 2 rookies in the rotation right now with Simeon Woods-Richardson, who's been there for most of the year, and then David Festa. You got Louis Varland tapped to start one of those doubleheader games. You've got, maybe some other help still in St. Paul or below. Zebby Matthews is a name we've heard. What's the state of the rotation right now, pending however long Joe Ryan's going to be out?
Yeah, I mean, you look at just even the Cleveland series this weekend, you're starting 2 rookies, Woods Richardson and Festa, and then Varland, who's in his second year, in 3 of the 4 games against the Guardians. Now, the Guardians, there's no sympathy there. They've had a ton of pitching injuries too.
Right.
And, they're missing, they won't have Shane Bieber for the series or Tristan McKenzie and some of their big arms. So it'll be kind of both teams trying to make do with what they have. David Festa, he's shown at least positive signs against the Cubs. He was able to get through a lineup multiple times. I mean, that's kind of been the big knock against him. I mean, the first time guys see him, he's overpowered him. I mean, he's been dominant. If you look at kind of the first time through the lineup, I think guys are hitting like 120 against him. It's the second and third time through when they've seen what he got, and he's not a guy who throws a ton of pitches. He just primarily throws 3. That's when guys are having success against him. So if he's able to do that and learning how to turn over a lineup a little bit better, that portrays some good things. Simeon Woods-Richardson, I feel like he's had a couple clunkers in a row. A little concerning. Obviously, it's deeper into the season, so that's something that he's going to have to work with. But for the most part this year, I mean, he's been as good as anybody in the rotation in terms of giving him 5 solid innings and giving him a chance to win. So hopefully, for the Twins' sake, this is a short-term blip and not something that's going to carry over for the stretch run here. And then you mentioned Zebby Matthews. I mean, he top prospect at AAA. Made a few starts there, I think 3 starts, and 2 of them have been pretty poor. Has like a 7 ERA. But if you look kind of like under the hood, I mean, it's almost like the batting average on balls in play is like 500 something. So it's almost like any time a ball goes into play, it turns into a hit. But he's also striking out a ton of guys, and he doesn't walk anybody. And that'll play. I mean, he's throwing 97 miles an hour fastballs. He has 5 or 6 pitches. So there is optimism that he'll be able to contribute down the stretch if able to turn around in AAA, whether it's in the rotation if it's needed or the bullpen. Just as a guy who it's a live arm and, at this time of the year, it's all hands on deck.
You mentioned that Festa really only throws 3 pitches. And, back when I was first watching baseball, maybe 30, 40 years ago, 3 pitches was enough. That was, you used to complain about 2-pitch pitchers. You had to go to the bullpen. 3, if you had some kind of fastball, some sort of breaking ball, then some sort of off-speed pitch, that was kind of your repertoire. How much do you need these days? How much is considered sufficient to be a starter these days? Is it 4? Is it 5? Is it 8? What do we got to do to be a starter these days?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are guys that could get away with 2 or 3, but you have to have an elite level pitch. Like Spencer Strider from Atlanta, he got hurt this year, but he's basically a fastball only pitcher. I think like 70% fastballs, but it's so unhittable, kind of like Joe Ryan's fastball. Joe Ryan's kind of transformed a little bit where his off-speed pitches have gotten better, but another guy who he can dominate because that pitch is so elite. Now you go to like a guy like Bailey Ober who probably needs 4 or 5 pitches because he's not throwing an unhittable fastball. David Festa, he has a great slider and a solid changeup. His fastball is probably more hittable than, it's like 96, 97 miles an hour, but it's not like a Joe Ryan fastball that rises on hitters or gets a lot of swings and misses. So it puts a lot of pressure on. If the slider's not having a great day or changeup's not having a great day, then he really has one swing and miss weapon. And so I think that's the issue for him in terms of just getting through a lineup multiple times. You can do it with 3 pitches, but it's hard. It just puts pressure on those pitches. All have to be working that day. And especially for a rookie, I mean, he's learning. He's also working on a curveball. He started throwing a little bit in AAA, something probably he'll start throwing more next year. He is thinking forward in terms of like how can this progress, but in the moment, it's just a lot of pressure on all the stuff has to be working today.
Speaking of pressure, I mean, like you said, like 3 of the 4 starters who are going to be pitching against Cleveland, young guys. I mean, Varland got some experience last year and started the year in the rotation this year. Faltered, went back to AAA. He's had some good starts lately in St. Paul, but we talk about Joe Ryan and optimism that, hey, it's not too long term, that he could still come back, late August, September, help them for the stretch run or at least the playoffs. But can they survive this stretch? It's a pretty important stretch. They got a lot of games against good teams, a lot of games against the teams that are right there with them in the division. Do you think they can, and how can they withstand this stretch and kind of feel like at least they're not losing ground at this point where they kind of hope to be making up ground?
Yeah, I mean, at least it's head-to-head matchups. I mean, you get Cleveland first and then Kansas City. So after the 7-game homestand, you're really going to know where you stand going into the last 6-7 weeks of the season. This is Louis Varland. I mean, this is kind of his chance to prove he's a starting pitcher. This is something he's kind of wanted, struggled at the beginning of the season, like you said. But I mean, it's kind of do or die time for him in terms of, are you going to be a bullpen guy full time, or can you prove that you can get through a lineup multiple times and start and have success there? So I think him going into, he'll start Friday against Cleveland. It's a good test. I mean, show what you've learned. Let's see what you can do against one of the best teams in baseball. They still might have the best record, even though they're on a 5-game losing streak. So great test for him going forward, even if it's 3 starts with Joe Ryan out where he's got to fill in. This is the big test for him. And same thing with some of the other guys. I mean, Chris Paddock, the Twins still have hope he'll be back at some point this year. I don't get a sense that anything's imminent. Might be something closer to September versus August. But for a lot of these guys, this is kind of your test. And can you put yourself in position to say you should be a starter? And then also, I mean, Pablo Lopez has to be better. He was their ace of the staff last year. He had the clunker against the Cubs. Can he be the guy that was their number 1 by far in the postseason last year? He's got to get back to that level. Bailey Ober's been really good, but they can't afford bad Pablo Lopez. So a lot of pressure on Pablo to kind of be the ace of the staff again.
Yeah, that's a good point. And just, like we said, pressure in general, but, also opportunity. And, it's a little, I want to say it's referendum is the wrong word. You start to like throw that word around and it's like, it puts maybe undue pressure, but we've been kind of waiting for a while for the pitching pipeline to produce more good young starters. And, some of the ones they've got right now came over in early trades, and Bailey Ober is certainly a case for, drafting and developing things like that. But Festa, Varland, if Zebby Matthews is in the mix here, these are guys where not just this year, but in the future, you're going to need these guys to be not just, 4th or 5th starters. You're going to need these guys to be frontline starters at some point, to kind of slot in. So this is a pretty interesting early test for some of these guys, I would say.
Yeah. And I mean, if you look at kind of big picture, I mean, their payroll is naturally going to grow next year. They're not going to have a ton of payroll space to sign free agent pitchers. You saw the trade deadline. They were unable to complete a deal for a starting pitcher, how hard it is to acquire good ones. So you're going to have to be able to produce them. And, Zebby Matthews was an 8th round pick. Great success story. David Festa, I think, was a 13th round pick, and him getting to where he's at is a great sign. Louis Varland and Bailey Ober also were late round picks. So they've done a good job producing those type of guys. They have some more guys at AA that maybe they're able to contribute next year. But you're going to have success right away. I mean, Simeon Woods Richardson, no one really knew what to expect from him this year, and he's turned into quite a good success story. So I do think they've done a solid job producing, maybe not the ace level pitchers that Twins fans are hoping for from Falvey, but kind of the number 4, number 5 starters so far. And then Bailey Ober, I would say he's better than that, but producing some of those starters that are having success in the back end of your rotation. But I think just as a philosophy, I mean, it just shows you how hard it is to acquire pitchers. And Twins came up empty at the trade deadline. They probably wish they had that extra depth now, but this is kind of the hand they're dealt. And you look around baseball. I mean, there's so many injuries with pitchers. Cleveland's a great example of it, where they have a great pitching pipeline, and that's the reason Cleveland's so good every year. For the most part, it's just because they can develop pitching so well.
Another piece of negative news. I don't want to dwell too much on the negative for a team that is in playoff contention, playoff position right now, but Carlos Correa not expected to rejoin them for this Cleveland series, at least. I'm sure they'd love to have him back, but want to have him back completely healthy and ready to contribute like he was. But he was their best player this year, just all around. Any timetable there? Any kind of inkling that this is getting closer to him at least going on a rehab assignment, or where's his progress at?
Yeah, I mean, they've been kind of hesitant to put a timetable on it. I know it's taken longer than I know Carlos Correa said it's taken longer than he expected, and maybe the training staff too. I mean, there's still pain in his foot. Plantar fasciitis, it's not a thing that's going to go away. He's going to have to play through pain, unfortunately. So it's just kind of getting to the point where he's able to sprint to the degree where he, can run the bases and play shortstop at a high level. And he hasn't started sprinting yet. So after that, he said he wants to do at least 2 or 3 games on a rehab assignment, just to kind of fine tune himself at the plate. He felt like when he came back earlier this year, it took him a few games to get back into the swing of things. And obviously you don't want that to be the case when you're in a playoff push and playing against good teams. So, kind of based off that timeline, if he needs at least 2 or 3 days on a rehab assignment, and he still needs to prove he can sprint, you're probably looking at still, a week would be a best case scenario, maybe a little bit under a week, like maybe the end of the Kansas City series, if not the next road trip. So, tough not to have him for the Cleveland series. They're fortunate Brooks Lee's been a solid defender and kind of filled in there in the infield, even though he's playing through a sore shoulder himself. But yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, Carlos Correa was their best player this year. I mean, all-star from both sides of the ball, kind of did it all. So huge loss not having him for this type of stretch, but him going through what he did last year, I think he has the experience and kind of I don't want to struggle again like I did last year. And they probably don't need him on the field to struggle that way. Whose at bats is he taking if it's not quality at bats?
Easy to forget with, just a couple of days of negative news. You had the loss, Pablo Lopez takes the loss in Chicago, and then you had the Joe Ryan game where he gets knocked out of the game and can't finish it. But besides that, you look at it and say, hey, they had won 5 in a row before that, and 3 of them were against Chicago, the White Sox. So it's a grain of salt, caveat. I think they went 12-1 against the White Sox this year. White Sox on Thursday finally fired their manager, who I believe was 101 games under 500 over two seasons with the club. Not great. That is for all you basketball fans out there, that is Kurt Rambis Timberwolves territory. He was 32-132 in his 2 seasons as Wolves coach. Worse off days by far than what you're experiencing right now. But they were playing pretty good baseball, and we can't forget that. One of the things that was going well for them, a couple of things. 1, the bullpen had been pretty solid, and 2, Matt Wallner has been absolutely raking since he came back from St. Paul, especially the last few weeks. What has been kind of the key to him getting going and providing such a boost for them?
Yeah, he's made some quality adjustments in AAA. I think he's forcing pitchers to beat him inside the strike zone a little bit more. Now, he's still going to strike out a ton. He's still going to chase some pitches. I mean, that hasn't changed. But he is crushing the ball. I mean, in terms of you look at exit velocity, the number of balls he's hitting above 100 miles an hour, which 95 miles an hour is classified as a hard hit in StatCast. I think he's in Aaron Judge territory over the last month. So, I mean, that's been huge. I mean, he's a guy who easy to forget how good he was against right-handed pitching in the second half of last year. But for a team that, if you're going to miss Carlos Correa for some big games, Byron Buxton's dealing with a back injury, this is a guy you need to step up and provide some power, and he's done that, him and Royce Lewis. So, I mean, it's turned into a nice combo. And it's a great sign. I mean, it's a testament to kind of his work. I mean, how badly he struggled in the first few weeks of the season. even struggled for a few weeks in AAA and able to turn around his season. And, at one point it looked like he was the odd man out. Like, where's he going to fit into the outfield when Trevor Larnach was hitting well and Max Kepler was hitting well? And, the way he's hitting now, I mean, his sky's kind of the limit for his power when he's hitting like this.
Do we have to recalibrate or reframe kind of how we look at this Cleveland series based on kind of how the pitching lined up? I mean, we'd have thought maybe a week or two ago, Twins got to win 3 out of 4 at least, kind of feel like they're jolting their way back into the race. But, they had that winning streak. Cleveland lost a few. It's only 3.5 right now. Do you feel like a split is still okay here now because of where they are and because of what's happened in the last couple of weeks? Or do you feel like they still need to take advantage of this home series and really, kind of tighten this gap right now?
I would say I think 4 wins on the homestand is something that I think that's probably the goal. I think it's easy to forget, like Kansas City, the next series right behind them.
Yeah.
Rocco Baldelli, I remember asking him on Monday, I think, whether they were going to move Joe Ryan to Friday, push him back a few days and save him for the Cleveland series. And I think the coaching staff discussed it, but shot it down pretty quickly. Just in terms of, it's hard to put extra emphasis on the Cleveland series when you have Kansas City right behind them. And then after that, you still have Texas and San Diego, and San Diego has a great record. So I think they look at it as it's still too far away to be standings chasing. Cleveland's going to do what Cleveland's going to do. I mean, if they've gotten by with one of the worst starting staffs in baseball this year with a great bullpen and they score a lot of runs, if that holds up for the next 6-7 weeks of the season and they win the division because of it, so be it. But the Twins, they're 0-5 against Cleveland. They have to, that has to be something that's on their minds in terms of just getting wins there. But I look at the homestand as a whole being as important as it is, just because Kansas City is right on their heels. I think they're a half game behind the Twins, maybe one game behind.
Yeah.
So that'll be a monster series, and Kansas City shows no signs of going away with the way Bobby Witt's playing. So I think as a whole, I mean, if you win 4 of the 7, no matter which way it comes through those 2 series, I think that'd be considered a success. Pitching what it is, I mean, it's probably lowered the expectations a touch. But Cleveland, I mean, they had a doubleheader yesterday on Wednesday, and they have a doubleheader on Friday. So I mean that hurts their pitching staff as well. So I wouldn't consider them coming in at full strength. They're on a 5-game losing streak, and they have a lot of things working against them too. So I think it's a fair playing field there between the two.
Kansas City, let's finish there. I mean, obviously we talked a little Chicago. They fired their manager. Kansas City, one of, if not the biggest surprise in baseball right now. They lose 106 games last year. We can't forget about them, right? I mean, everybody keeps waiting for them to fade, but yeah, this is a 3-team race, not just a 2-team race.
Yeah, and I think maybe even Royce said it. I know I've talked about it in the press box with somebody, but he thinks they're the most talented team in the division. Yep. And Bobby Witt playing the way he is, he's probably the most talented player in the division. So I don't get the sense they're going away. They added at the trade deadline to try to add some pitching depth for guys that like Cole Reagans I think this is his first full season in the big leagues, and some guys are going to kind of be at their innings limits, kind of like where Bailey Ober and Joe Ryan were a little bit last year. So they're going to have to manage that. But for a team that lost 100 games, that it's remarkable what they're doing. That you watch them play. They're kind of like the Twins. They play really well in the late innings. They score against bullpens, so it's hard to put them away. And even if you beat them, it feels like it's not an easy win. So it'll be a good series for the Twins. Royce Lewis mentioned he hasn't played against Cleveland this year, and he only got to play 2 or 3 innings against Kansas City on opening day before his injury. So first time he's excited for the kind of the divisional matchup personally, just his first taste of it. But should be a fun weekend or fun week as a whole, just in terms of Twins getting kind of a big series, 2 big series at home crowd. And I think Kansas City's a legitimate challenger. I don't see them going away at all.
From where I sit right now, too, weather forecast looks immaculate. Looks like mid-September weather, kind of like low 70s and sunny. Should be comfortable at the ballpark. I hope you would imagine they'll get some good crowds out there as well. Bobby, enjoy it. Enjoy the weekend. Enjoy the coverage. We'll follow it in Star Tribune, startribune.com, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
Watch your dreams and savings grow with Royal Credit Union's 4.25% annual percentage yield 12-month certificate. Open now at any Royal office or online at rcu.org/certificate saver. Early withdrawal penalties could reduce earnings and principal. APY accurate as of 2/1/25. Insured by NCUA.
Great stuff from Bobby. And just to reiterate, should be immaculate vibes at Target Field. Great weather. Chance for the Twins to make a move in the AL Central over these next 7 games. Could really define their season. Won't make or break their season, but could define their season in terms of, hey, is this just a nice little wild card contending team, or is this a team that could overtake Cleveland, win the division, perhaps get a bye into that division round, things like that. A lot at stake this weekend, and we will see how it turns out. Let us finish with the cooler. Mike Sertich, legendary Minnesota-Duluth men's hockey coach, died this week on Thursday, age 77, had a 2-year battle with pancreatic cancer. This one hit me. I remember not covering University of Minnesota-Duluth, but I was the Gophers men's hockey beat writer at the Minnesota Daily, college paper at the University of Minnesota when I think that was my junior year in school. And so covering that team, one of their first series that year was a road series up at Minnesota-Duluth. Gophers coached by Doug Woog, Minnesota-Duluth coached by Mike Sertich at the time. And I remember there was so much at stake in that series. I didn't really know much about Mike Sertich at the time, but I got him on the phone before the series started, had a good conversation with him. He said, hey, when you're up here, come find me in my office after the game. We'll sit, we'll talk, we'll do all the, we'll give you kind of the longer lowdown of everything going on here. And yeah, that meant a lot to me as a young reporter. I was like 20, 21 at the time, going up there for that series. It was supercharged because that was Dave Spihar's freshman season with the Gophers, the 96-97 season. Excellent player from Duluth East. Great scorer in high school hockey prep career, one of the greatest high school hockey players of all time, most accomplished Minnesota hockey players of all time, chooses the Gophers over the hometown school. So he's going back to Duluth early in his freshman season, and they're chanting his name. They're saying Spihar sucks all the time, the whole 2-game series. Gophers lose the first one 7-4. They win the second one 4-3, so it's a split. And I remember going up there with my friend Tim Klobuchar, who was also at the Daily. He was a Ely native, so he was up there, not right by his hometown. He would not be happy if I tried to say Duluth is near Ely, but it's it's on the way. It's up there at the very least. So he went up there. We both wrote stories with had some photographers from the Daily up there as well. Had some fun up there in Duluth that weekend as well. But we were both in Mike Sertich's office. I think it was after game 2 of the series, just kind of shooting the breeze, talking about his love of the underdog, why he had stayed at Minnesota-Duluth all those years, why he had turned down the Gophers job in 1985 after he had really revived Minnesota-Duluth program, taken them to 3 straight NCAA tournaments. They came within just a whisper. They lost in multiple overtimes in the championship game, 1984. Just why he had turned that down, why he, his kind of love of being the underdog, and that was reflected in one of the petty beefs that was going on at the time. He didn't like that when they played the Gophers at Mariucci, they put Duluth up on the scoreboard and just put U of M for the Gophers. So when they played at, I believe that was the deck at the time. They played at the Duluth Entertainment and Convention Center against the Gophers in that series in October of 1996. They put U of M Twin Cities up on the scoreboard for the Gophers. I do remember that. So just the pettiness, the rivalry that existed between those two schools then, Minnesota-Duluth was on a little bit of a they were not in their glory days at that point, right? There was a decade after they'd made all those tournament runs. I think Sertich was only a few years away from leaving Duluth. Scott Sandelin would come in, revive that program again, win those elusive national titles that Sertich couldn't quite win. But he was an all-timer, an all-time great. I remember sitting in his office. We were there for like an hour. We ended up being there so long. We were watching the end of the World Series. It was Atlanta against the Yankees, and I was a huge Atlanta fan back then. We watched the last out of the Braves losing the 96 World Series in his office. They had it on a little TV in there, just kind of shooting the breeze with Mike Sertich. He was generous with his time, an all-time underdog, and that's my remembrance of him. A few years later, I covered his nephews at Roseville High School. His brother Steve was coaching at Roseville. His nephews Mike and Marty were tremendous players for Roseville. Marty went on to become a great college hockey player as well. Both of them went to Colorado College, but Marty won the Hobie Baker Award in 2005. So a lot of remembrances of the Sertich hockey family, a lot of remembrances of that series in particular, being a young reporter, getting so much time and genuine kind of effort from Mike Sertich up there. I won't forget that. And my condolences to the family. Great run for him, great hockey guy, and that is my Mike Sertich remembrance. That will do it for me today. That'll do it for me this week. Hope you enjoyed everything we brought to you this week. Should be some fun surprises next week. Don't want to reveal too much, but I've got something in the hopper right now that I hope is going to come to fruition for next week. Plus the usual stuff. Royce won't be with me on Monday. Probably going to have him on a different show next week. He's got a little bit of time off. So Andrew Kramer expected to join me on Monday to talk Vikings off of that first preseason game. Plenty of other stuff coming up next week. Until then, I am Michael Rand. Have a great weekend. Back at it again on Monday.